And we are live. It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast, to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into episode number 41 of season 2, I got to talk to you, the people, about a few quick things. First off, if you are new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if we happen to be your favorite Detroit Pistons podcast out right now, make sure to click the link in the description below this video or in our YouTube bio, because we have partnered up with Grind Clothing Co. They are our official merch sponsor. So you can rep Revved Up 906 at the library, in the gym, on the street, at Pistons games by clicking that link. And you can check out a plethora of different design options with our logos. Us and the owner got together, mixed some different designs together, and we came out with some great stuff. And make sure to click the link. Also, there's a link to Grind Clothing Co.'s Instagram. So make sure to go give them a follow. Let's get into episode number 41 of season 2. And we wanted to take some time to talk about everything that has transpired since the Pistons and Tom Gores hired Trajan Langdon. So we are going to be looking at all his moves starting June 19th and grade them and talk about all the little intricacies and try to figure out, is Trajan Langdon doing a good job from our perspective? And then also, if you guys have any thoughts, comments, opinions on these moves Trajan Langdon has made the last couple months, make sure to comment below. We would love to know what you guys have to say. So Ryan, as we know, on May 31st, Trajan Langdon is hired by the Detroit Pistons. That same day, Troy Weaver is fired and now is a advisor, I believe, for the Washington Wizards. And a couple days later, about 2 weeks later, Trajan Langdon settled into the job, and June 19th, part ways with Monty Williams. And we kind of given our first thoughts, but Ryan, when looking at the overview of what Trajan Langdon has done and bringing in JB Bickerstaff, has that now shown to be a good decision?
I think it has to be a good decision. When you're coming off of one of the worst seasons in Pistons history, it kind of is deserving that you would expect Monty Williams to be fired. You would expect Troy Weaver to be gone. Like, you would expect these things to happen. And every Pistons fan out there, not even just Pistons fans, but everyone was going like, yeah, there's no way that they're still in their positions come next season. There's just no way. And then as time kind of moved on a little bit before Langdon got brought in, it was like, ooh, maybe Weaver is safe, maybe Williams is safe. Who's to say? And then, well, we all know what happens. Langdon comes in and then just hits the ground running, and those two guys are gone immediately. And personally, at that point in time, I'm going like, well, I still have a soft spot for Monty because he's played in the NBA. He's a good coach. Obviously, he's helped turn the Phoenix Suns around. He's a good guy. He's a good person. But he wasn't made for the Pistons. Troy Weaver, same thing. Good guy, right? He was been good every stop he's been along the ride. But Detroit clearly wasn't the spot for him. And looking back at what we experienced with them, it was painful. But in this short period of time, with JB Bickerstaff now at the helm at the coaching position, and then who's to say, even if the GM is hired or not, I would expect not this season, and it's just full on Langdon from here on out. But what I feel like is going on with the Pistons, with Bickerstaff, with Langdon, I feel like there's a lot more hope, not just for us, but for Pistons fans and NBA fans in general. Like, there's a lot more hope going into next season, just with those two moves alone compared to what it was with Weaver and Williams.
I especially was happy with Trajan making this decision just to cut cut the cord and let Monty Williams go, just because at times it didn't look like he was bought into this Pistons organization. And Trajan right away at his press conference said that everyone needs to buy in, from the secretary at the front desk in the lobby to me, the coaching staff. Everyone has to buy into getting this team and this organization back on the right path. And Monty Williams was a part of having to sever that side of the team. Ryan, when talking about giving this decision by Trajan Langdon a grade, I give it a B, because, you could give it an A plus because it was the perfect decision, but Monty was a former coach of the year. So I give it a B. Ryan, what grade do you give this move?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on a B. I just, it's not like it's, whoa, that's a great move. And it's also not like we don't know at this point. Who's to say JV Bickerstaff doesn't have a bad season this upcoming year? Granted, I don't want that. Nobody wants that. But who's to say what happens? We don't know. It's a big what if game right now. We know JV Bickerstaff, with his history with the Cavs, the last 5 seasons with him, like they went from one of the worst teams in the league to one of the best contending championship quality teams in the NBA overall. So I would agree. I think it's a B, because I think it's fair enough to say that it was a great move on Langdon's part, but we still need to see what it all comes out of it.
So 7 days after Trajan Langdon fired Monty Williams, we go into the long-awaited draft, NBA draft. We have 2 picks in the first round, second round. And with the 5th pick in this year's NBA draft, Trajan Langdon picks up Ron Holland just 7 days later. We did a live stream for the draft. We were talking about guys that were still left on the board, like Dalton Connect and others. And then we get Ron Holland, which was kind of somebody that was like a B list, like on the B list as far as top of mind awareness for us. And he comes out in summer league and shows out in a big way at just 18 years old. Ryan, what are some of your thoughts about this bold move by Trajan Langdon going out and get Ron Holland at 5?
So to me, he didn't go with the consensus, right? He didn't go with the guy that everybody, analysts, fans, you name it, he didn't go after the guys that everybody was talking about at that pick. He went after a guy that he believed in. And obviously Holland didn't have a fantastic year with the G League Ignite this past season, but that's because all the pressure was pretty much put on him and Matas Bazulis, who was also talked about at 5 for the Pistons. But Holland was a consensus number 2 prospect in his draft, in his high school recruiting class. So like, he has the talent, he has the ceiling. He had a bad season, and that's the drawback there. But you look at what he did in the summer league. He showed a lot of flashes. He showed his versatility around the rim, the way he cuts and moves within an offense. And like we always mentioned, you always want players to move with a purpose. And Ron Holland does that without the ball in his hands. And that's something I believe is a core thing, a core reason to someone being on the floor, is you always have to move with a purpose. You can't just sit in the corner and expect the ball, or flash up top and just beg. You have to make sudden moves, sudden changes within the offense that will not only better yourself, but better the team and the outcome. And obviously his 3-point shooting needs to be addressed. It's not great. He shot, 25% from 3 in summer league. That is not good. It's better than Asar Thompson last season in total, but it's still not good. But if he can knock down more threes, he can stay consistent, and the consistency from what he showed us in summer league, I think this is a good pick overall, and I have no issues with Ron Holland at 5.
So as far as grading Ron Holland being picked at 5 on Trajan Langdon's part, I'd probably give him an A, just because I look at the past roster last season and I look at guys like Quentin Grimes that we've lost, Stanley Amude, and we lost him. I'd rather have Ron Holland. So that's why I give him an A. Ryan, what do you give this draft pick?
I got to give him a B, because it's similar to JB Bickerstaff and the moves Langdon has made early on. We have yet to see what really comes out of it. but
Yeah.
I want to give it higher than a B. But something in me is telling me I can't give it higher than a B just because like Asar Thompson, even though they are very similar players, they're completely different at the same time. But what Asar showed us last year was nothing spectacular. He had a couple flashes here and there, but in the sense that they are kind of in the similar mold, I'm kind of hesitant on giving Ron Holland an A, even though Asar Thompson in Summer League was nothing compared to what Ron Holland was this year,
Right.
just because Ron Holland was so much better. But I have to give him a B.
All right. So the next day, June 27th, the second round of the NBA draft occurs. And with the 37th pick in this year's draft, Trajan Langdon picks up Bobby Klintman. Something to note is when we are going through these dates, Trajan Langdon made 7 days consecutive with like big moves, like 2 draft picks, 2 days in a row, trades, decline not team out, like all these different things happen 7 consecutive days in 1 week. It's kind of crazy everything that transpired in the last couple months. But Bobby Klintman showing, this summer league that he belongs in this league and he is NBA ready and has kind of turned out to be an NBA favorite. Videos of him are starting to go viral in the gym. Ryan, what are some of your first thoughts on Bobby Klintman? And Trajan Langdon had to have seen something in him.
Yeah, when you go through this process, like you mentioned, 7 days in a row, Langdon's not stopped working this entire offseason. He's just been at it 24/7, day and night, and it shows. And to me, what the draft analysis of, or just the mind behind the draft with Langdon is, even though he didn't pick up a shooter in Ron Holland, he picked up an overall player there. But he ended up picking up a shooter later on with Bobby Klintman, who honestly, everybody would agree at this point that Klintman could have been a first round pick easily, just because of what he showed in Summer League. He showed major flashes. He's a great shooter, great scorer, a good defender, very solid on the defensive end. He's long. He has great size. He clogs the lane. He can do just about everything you could really want in a player, given where you drafted him. And the only thing that I think that needs work in his game is the consistency, which we saw, because you were to have one game where he'd go off for 11 and 7, or there's a game where he just really wasn't looking to score the ball and he got the 12 boards and that's about it. So I think the consistency, if it were to be for a long-term wise, I think it'd be great and he would blossom into a great player. But from what he showed us being picked 37, something that Langdon actually traded up for, because it was, what was it? He traded with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and it was pick 57 and cash to the Timberwolves for 37 and Wendell Moore Jr. And to me, what's crazy is we just gave up the 57th overall pick, which is worse than the 37th overall pick. And we get another player on top of drafting Klintman. Like, that's just a great move overall. A head scratcher to me for the Timberwolves there, but obviously the Timberwolves are loaded and they're competing for a championship, and it's working out for them right now. But Klintman, I think, is a stud and a major steal for Langdon in this draft.
Yeah, this is where I really respect Trajan Langdon's basketball IQ, because no one was really talking about Bobby Klintman. I saw a couple highlights on Instagram over the years, but obviously not much talk about him. And then to be taken at 37 in a draft that is known for being kind of rough and not much talent, getting a guy like Bobby Klintman at 37 and seeing the abilities he has was a great move. And I think it's going to pay off in years to come. I think Bobby's going to be a part of this team and a big part of this team. And seeing where he stacks up with second rounders and summer league statistics and just overall impact, I'm going to give this draft pick an A plus. Obviously, we haven't seen what he can give to the Pistons during the regular season, but I still prefer Bobby over a Quentin Grimes. I still prefer him over a Stanley Amude. Some of these guys that we've lost since last season, I'd rather have a Bobby Klintman on a roster than those guys. Ryan, when talking about a grade for Trajan Langdon's decision to pick up Bobby Klintman at 37, you're great.
See, it's higher than Ron Holland. It's a B plus. The only reason why it's a B plus is because this is a guy that really showed what he can do. When I watched him play, I'm like, yeah, there's no way he doesn't make the team, and he isn't with the team for a long-term plan. I mean, Langdon went out and signed him to a 4-year deal, fully guaranteed, which is just crazy for a second-round pick. But that shows you his belief in Bobby Klintman. And what we saw in Summer League is probably the exact same thing that Langdon saw. And that's why I can't give it higher than a B plus, just because it is a second round pick. There's not a lot of second round picks that can make it in the NBA, more so now than ever. But just because he is a second round pick, it's a little hesitancy there for a higher grade. But I would say at least a B plus because of what he showed us.
So after Trajan Langdon drafts Ron Holland, Bobby Klintman, the next day after the second round draft, June 28th, he trades Quentin Grimes to the Mavericks for 3 second-round picks and Tim Hardaway Jr., Detroit native and son of a legend. Tim Hardaway Jr. has had himself a great career, and I do see him being able to bring interesting dynamic to this Detroit Pistons team. Somebody that wasn't really on my radar of a guy I would want to bring in. But then when you look at the statistics with the minutes he had on the Mavericks, it makes sense. What are some of your first thoughts on this trade, Ryan?
Yeah, like you said, this is one of those guys that I would say Pistons fans everywhere, he wasn't on our radar. Just because you think of the Mavericks where they are, they're competing for a championship. They have the roster to do it. Tim Hardaway Jr. is a high quality player and something that he's been with them this entire stretch of them contending the last couple of years. So he just wasn't high on the radar for me. But I have zero complaints about him coming in. As massive as his contract is with what's left on his deal, I honestly do not care on how much money we would be paying him. Just considering the fact that you'd be bringing in a high quality player, somebody who helped change the culture in Dallas to where they are now. And that's something that he could bring to Detroit. He has the experience. He's had a long career thus far, 11 seasons, I believe. He's been consistent on his averages. He's averaged more than 12 points a game his entire career. And I know that's on the lower end, but still that's nothing to shake your head about. Like that's pretty darn good. There's not a lot of guys that can go out there and do that. And the fact that he's a shooter, obviously go blue, because who wouldn't want a Michigan guy in Michigan once again. But what he can do for offensively, defensively, team culture wise, this is a guy that I really wanted. I've wanted Tim Hardaway Jr. I want any Michigan player to come back to Detroit. I want that. But to have a high quality player just in general come in, it was a great move for Langdon.
So as far as grade, I'm very, very happy with this trade, just because I had high hopes for Quentin Grimes at one point. And just after seeing him go in and out of injuries, and when he was playing, just wasn't really happy with his play. I was kind of happy to see how much we got for him. I think we got that much out of him is just because of the based on the upside and just being young compared to Tim Hardaway Jr. But stocking up on second round picks and getting a vet, I don't mind it at all. I give it an A++, just because I think Quentin Grimes is going to be kind of a heartbreaker, a guy that you're like, oh, this guy's going to be amazing. He's going to be that 3-and-D player that this Detroit Pistons team needs. And I just didn't see what I wanted. Ryan, as far as grade talk for this trade, what grade would you give this for Trajan?
I honestly have to give it an A+ too. Not an A++ like you, but an A+. Just because, like, you think of what Quentin Grimes could have been for us, you have to think of the upside there. That trade that Weaver made to get Quentin Grimes at that time, we're like, okay, obviously he was a throw into that deal later on, but Quentin Grimes is not a bad player at all. He had an injury riddled season, and that's about it. He hasn't had a clear cut season where he's fully healthy and can do a lot of little things here and there. He hasn't had that. So potentially us giving him that opportunity, I was all for it. But what Tim Hardaway can do, I kind of have to give the A plus just because you get a high quality player who can help establish a culture, which the Pistons desperately need. We've talked about that for so long now. But he can set a culture. We got 3 draft picks. Granted, they're not first round picks, but 3 second round picks that you could move at some point in time, certain players here, or even trade up in a draft. Like the fact you got assets and a high quality player for a guy that, like, who knows what could happen with, I have to give it an A plus.
So the next day, June 29th, Trajan Langdon wakes up and he decides to decline team option on James Wiseman. Ryan, a player that we're pretty high on. Not much to talk about here just because James Wiseman didn't do too much. I mean, he was a backup at times last season for Jalen Duren. Overall, I give this a B just because I think it was inevitable in my opinion.
I have to give it. It's sad to say for me, just because if you saw the potential that was there with Wiseman that he just can never unlock. Shout out to one of our previous episodes when we talked about unlocking James Wiseman. But he just could never unlock who he was, and because of that, I have to give this move from Langdon. I have to give it an A plus, just because Wiseman, with his time in Detroit, never proved to be anything. He just proved to be a bench warmer, honestly. And I'm not trying to be mean right now, but he had flashes here and there of greatness on the boards, greatness scoring the ball. I mean, he's a specimen. Like the length he has and the speed he has, which is much bigger and faster than a lot of the big men in the NBA currently, and he just never could get there. And so because of that move, it opens up obviously some cap space. Cap space at this point in time, but and then just an open roster spot where you can give Wiseman still an opportunity to play in the NBA and go try and unlock his abilities somewhere else. And I think he may be able to do that in Indiana. But I think the move was inevitable, like you said, and that's why, to me, I got to give it an A plus, just because you think back at the fact that we traded away Saddiq Bey to get James Wiseman, and Saddiq Bey has proven to be consistent since that trade, where James Wiseman, like I said, was pretty much a glorified bench warmer. And I hate being mean, but it is true. He just did nothing for us.
So the next day, Trajan, on quite the run, hires JB Bickerstaff as the next Detroit Pistons head coach. And that was somebody that we had talked about in our head coaching candidates episode, but it wasn't somebody that we were super high on. We were talking about guys like Micah Nori and co. But we see JB Bickerstaff in his press conference, and we're pretty impressed. We like some of his responses. We like the way he was so quick to give answers about rotation and players chemistry wise. Overall, because we have to get through these because we're running out of time here. I give this an A. I like JB Bickerstaff. I like that he's a guy that grew up in a head coach household. I like that he's been thinking in that thought process for such a long time. He's worked alongside some great coaches. He seems like the kind of guy that has the basketball smart that a guy like Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey are going to respect. So I give this higher by Trajan Langdon an A. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I have to agree. I have to give it an A. Just from the standpoint of the fact that he wasn't even hired yet, and he was watching film, watching what our guys' strengths and weaknesses are, what we can do on the offensive side of the ball, what we can do on the defensive side of the ball, what we can do for the future as a franchise. He was just thinking about all that before even getting hired. And so because of that, he showed his commitment, and then his statements in the introductory press conference were amazing. I have to give it an A.
Later that day, on June 30th, Trajan Langdon gets Cade Cunningham to sign that dotted line for a extension, which is a 5-year, $226 million max contract. And Ryan, this, just like James Wiseman getting cut, was inevitable. It had to happen. We can't lose Cade Cunningham. He has to stay with the Pistons. And I think most of the fans who were in the same thought process, uh, I was happy to see this. I say pay the man. He's a good guy. I think he's a good player. I give this pickup a plus. Ryan, what are some of your first thoughts on Cade's extension?
To me, I have to give it an A, just because when you look at far, obviously he was out for a second year in total because of the injury slash surgery, and so we haven't had a full landscape of Cade Cunningham yet. We've seen, obviously this season was great for him. He took his game to another jump up, but I would expect him to do that again this year. The only reason I have to give it an A is just because we haven't seen all he can do, and that's not his fault. That is Troy Weaver's fault and Monty Williams' fault. It's not his fault, and it just, he never had the pieces around him to bring his game to the next level. Where these moves that Langdon has made with Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, and don't forget Tobias Harris, and even throw in Ron Holland and Bobby Clinton, and then our two-way player Dennis Jenkins into the mix. All these additions, I think, are going to help uplift Cade to that next level. Where next year, I will say that I would grade it an A plus, but right now I have to give it an A just because it's still what if on his development even more. But I think with what's all said and done between the additions and the JV Bickerstaff, I think I will say it's an A plus next year, but I have to give it an A right now.
So once again, the next day, July 1st, to finish that 7-day span of basically flipping the Detroit Pistons roster, Trajan Langdon signs Tobias Harris to a 2-year, $52 million deal to make Tobias's return to the Detroit Pistons since 2018. Tobias Harris, we looked at the stat line. We talked about this trade earlier. Make sure to go check out that episode. We talked about the new additions to this Pistons organization. Tobias literally has identical stat line to what he had when he had his stint with the Detroit Pistons, basically bringing everything he did to the organization last time is what we expect. Ryan, I give this signing an A plus. Tobias is a guy that loves to be in Detroit, didn't want to leave to Detroit, and he's happy to be back. And it seems that he has a good rapport with Trajan Langdon and hopefully now with JB Bickerstaff. I give the pickup an A plus. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah, I have to give it an A plus too. When we think about what he's done since being in Detroit originally, he played with the Clippers, and at that time the Clippers sucked because but moves on to Philadelphia and gets a chance to play with Joel Embiid, James Harden, Tyrese Maxey. The list goes on. And so I would say because of the amount of experience he's gotten since being in Detroit, I think that's what goes into him being an A plus pickup, because he played with an elite player in Joel Embiid. He played with a very high caliber player in James Harden. He played with a high caliber player, young, talented player in Tyrese Maxey for the last couple of years. He's been around Nick Nurse, who's a good basketball mind. He's done and experienced a whole lot with a great group of guys that I think all those life lessons and experiences he can help apply to this young Pistons team. And because of that, I have to give this signing an A plus.
Yeah, I like the move too because the Pistons debut game at Summer League, Tobias Harris and Cade Cunningham were together courtside. And we know that Cade Cunningham is a little bit of a more, I wouldn't say shy, but just a little bit reserved. I know that Tobias Harris kind of set that up. And that's what I love about Tobias. He's such a great leader. And I hope he continues to bring it to the Detroit Pistons organization. So after that 7-day span, Trajan Langdon takes a seat back a little bit for 5 days, kind of gets his wits within himself, probably meets over Summer League with the front office of the Pistons, and gets together July 6th and signs Malik Beasley to a 1-year, $6 million deal. Malik Beasley has been a guy that I've wanted on the Pistons roster for a long, long time. When I was GM of the Pistons roster on NBA 2K, I traded for Malik Beasley. That's how much I love this guy. I just love how he's so good at defending one-on-one, getting in the passing lanes while being a knockdown three-point shooter. Overall, I give this signing an A. Plus, it's only $6 million in 1 year. So if everything doesn't pan out with Malik Beasley, if he's unhappy, if the season goes rough, he was with the Pistons for 1 season. Or if everything goes great, we get him on a new contract and keep him for a playoff run. Ryan, what are your thoughts on a grade for bringing in a guy like Malik Beasley on Trajan Langdon's part?
I have to give it an A. He shot over 40% from three last year, something that this entire team did not do. From that alone, as sad as that may be, but $6 million for on a 1 year deal is not much. You would expect Malik Beasley to go out and sign a bigger contract than that elsewhere. But I think I think he just wanted to, something attracted him to the Pistons, and I think it's Trajan Langdon alongside of the addition of Tobias Harris and then Tim Hardaway Jr. And then just this overall young team. I think Beasley saw something there and wanted to stick his feet in the water there. But I have to give it an A because the contract is small. And not only if it works out, but come trade deadline, you can move Beasley to a contending team and get some assets back in return. So I think this is an A signing. Could be an A plus depending on how this next season goes. But I have to give it an A just because the contract, as small as it is, you know what type of player you're going to get. You're going to get a great shooter, a good point guard, somebody who can facilitate, can defend, can score at all 3 levels. Just a good overall player in Malik Beasley.
So there you have it. That is most of Trajan Langdon's moves that he has made while in position with the Detroit Pistons organization. That 7-day span is one for the ages. That's going to be one we're going to talk about, hopefully, when the Detroit Pistons are hoisting that NBA championship. Make sure to like and subscribe. Comment below what your thoughts are on all these moves. If you like the Pistons giving Cade Cunningham that much money, if you don't like Malik Beasley and didn't play with him on 2K, let us know. We'd love to know what you guys have to say. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next episode, episode number 42. Peace.